Her name was Eleanor Voss. She was 41 years old. 3 weeks ago, in front of 500 people seated beneath the lights of the Meridian Athletic Club's Grand Exhibition Hall, a man who had spent 15 years building his reputation on the backs of people he had dismissed, stood at a microphone and waited for the moment he was certain would finally silence her for good. He did not get what he expected. What he received instead arrived so quietly and with such complete finality that the room held its breath for nearly 7 seconds before anyone moved. What Eleanor carried into that room had taken 8 years to prepare, and when she set it down on the table in front of him, every person in that hall understood something had ended that could not be undone. Before she tells you what happened next, she would like to ask one thing. If you have ever sat quietly in a room where you were made to feel small and kept going anyway, please consider subscribing. Drop your city and the time it is where you are in the comments below. She loves knowing where you are listening from. Part 2, Flashback and Family Hierarchy. To understand what Eleanor carried into that hall, you have to understand the world she was raised in. Her father, Gerald Voss, managed the regional operations of a mid-sized insurance firm out of a corner office in Sacramento, California. He was a man who wore starched shirts even on weekends, and who kept 3 copies of every document he had ever signed, organized by year in fireproof cabinets along one wall of his home office. He valued order above sentiment and reputation above almost everything. He was not a cruel man. He was a man who believed that precision was a form of love, and who never learned that precision, applied to a child, can feel like measurement. Eleanor's mother, Patricia, taught piano to neighborhood children 3 afternoons a week and served on 2 church committees. She was warm in the way that a well-appointed sitting room is warm, everything in its place, the temperature carefully maintained, no drafts permitted. She had opinions about posture, about diction, about the correct way to enter a room. She offered these opinions freely. She offered them most freely to Eleanor. Eleanor had one sibling. His name was Marcus. He was 3 years older, broad-shouldered, and blessed with the kind of easy confidence that made adults in his orbit feel that the room had become slightly more manageable. Gerald had coached his youth baseball team until Marcus aged out of the league. Patricia had framed every one of his newspaper clippings and arranged them in the hallway near the front door, where visitors would see them without needing to be directed. When Marcus brought home a C- in American history the spring of his junior year, Gerald looked at the paper for a long moment and then said, quietly, that he was sure Marcus understood what needed to happen next. There was no revision of the hall display. Eleanor understood her position in this household the way a person understands the geography of a room they have lived in long enough not from studying it, but from the accumulated knowledge of where the furniture is in the dark. She moved carefully, she spoke carefully. She achieved things carefully and reported them with the modesty she had learned was expected of her. The one person in her life who asked no such modesty of her was her grandfather. His name was Raymond Voss, Gerald's father, a retired civil engineer who had spent 30 years building roads and drainage systems for municipalities across the Central Valley. He was a man of very few decorative gestures. He kept a small house near Fresno, drove the same truck for 12 years, and had a workshop in the garage that smelled of pine resin and machine oil. When Eleanor was 7, he had taken her into that workshop and let her help him level a bookshelf. He showed her how to read a bubble level, how to measure twice, how to trust what the instruments told her over what her eye assumed. That afternoon had settled something in her. Raymond visited twice a year and called every Sunday. He asked Eleanor about her schoolwork not to confirm that she was performing, but because he was interested in what she was learning. He remembered the details she told him. He asked follow-up questions the next time they spoke. When Eleanor told him, at age 14, that she had begun studying martial arts at a community center near her school, a practical, traditional Muay Thai program run by a retired instructor named Desmond Clark Raymond, did not ask whether it was suitable for a girl. He asked who was teaching her and whether she trusted him. She said she did. He said, then you should keep going. She did. Part 3 Mistreatment montage. The signs of how this story would unfold were present early, if Eleanor had known how to read them. Looking back, she could trace the pattern with the steady hand of someone who had finally found the right ruler. The first moment that stayed with her came in the summer before 8th grade. Eleanor had trained at Desmond's program for 2 years by then, and that August she placed second in her age division at a regional youth invitational, a competition attended by clubs from 6 counties, held at a high school gymnasium in Stockton. Second place meant a silver certificate and a ribbon the color of old pewter. She carried them home on the bus, folded carefully inside her sports bag. Her mother was in the kitchen when Eleanor came in. Eleanor set the ribbon on the counter beside the fruit bowl. Patricia glanced at it the way one glances at a piece of mail that is clearly not urgent. She said, "That's nice, sweetheart." She did not ask who Eleanor had competed against, or what she had done in the ring, or whether it had been close. She turned back to the stove. The ribbon stayed on the counter until Tuesday, when Eleanor moved it to her room. Marcus had the same weekend attended a baseball showcase for college recruiters in San Diego. Gerald and Patricia had driven down Friday evening and returned Sunday afternoon. There were photographs. The second moment came during the winter of Eleanor's sophomore year of high school. She had by then advanced considerably in her training. Desmond was a man who taught not just technique, but the philosophy beneath technique: composure as a practice, patience as a form of power, the understanding that the person who controls their own response controls the encounter. Eleanor absorbed this the way she absorbed everything Desmond taught her, steadily, without rush. That December, her school held its annual academic honors assembly. Eleanor had earned the top mark in her app chemistry class. She had also quietly been awarded a commendation from the Regional Science Foundation for an independent project she had submitted in the fall. The commendation came with a small framed certificate and a brief write-up in the district's education newsletter. Patricia came to the assembly. She brought a camera. She photographed Marcus, who was receiving a varsity athletic letter in the school lobby. She was already in the parking lot by the time Eleanor's name was called. Eleanor stood at the podium and accepted the commendation from the principal. She looked out at the auditorium. Her grandfather Raymond, who had driven 2 hours from Fresno without telling anyone he was coming, was sitting in the fourth row in his good flannel shirt. He was applauding with his whole hands. When her eyes found his, he nodded once. She did not cry until she was in his truck in the parking lot. The third moment occurred the spring of her freshman year of college. Eleanor had earned a scholarship to study kinesiology at a state university in Northern California. The scholarship was partial but meaningful. It covered her tuition, and she supplemented it with part-time work at the campus athletic facility. She called home every Sunday as she had been taught and reported her progress with the measured delivery she had been raised to use. That March, she was selected to represent her university at a collegiate Muay Thai invitational in Portland, Oregon. She was the only first-year student selected. Desmond, who had maintained contact with her training since she left for school, had been instrumental in preparing her. She called Raymond before she called anyone else. He listened to the whole thing and then said slowly that she had done something worth being proud of. She called her parents the same evening. Gerald listened. When she finished, he said, quietly, that he hoped she wouldn't let it distract from her coursework. Patricia asked if the travel was safe and whether she had enough to eat. Neither asked where Portland was, or whether they could watch, or what weight class she competed in. Marcus, who was working his second year at Gerald's firm by then, had recently been promoted to a regional coordinator position. A framed announcement hung in the hallway near the front door, beside the baseball clippings. The fourth moment arrived when Eleanor was 26. She had, by then, completed her degree, earned a certification in sports rehabilitation, and opened a small practice in Sacramento. She also continued to compete and train. She had become, without particularly seeking the title, a recognized figure in the regional Muay Thai community, someone other coaches sent their students to when they needed specific guidance on conditioning and form. That year, she was profiled in a regional fitness publication. A brief article, 2 pages, with a photograph taken outside her practice. She sent a copy to her parents. Gerald called 2 days later. He told her the article was well done. He then said carefully that he hoped she understood that this was a fine hobby, but that she should be thinking about what would sustain her financially in the long term. He used the word hobby twice. His voice was not unkind. That was the part she remembered most clearly, how entirely without malice it was. She thanked him for calling. She kept her voice steady for the entire conversation. She set the phone down on the kitchen counter and stood at the window for a long time. The street outside was quiet. Her hands were at her sides, very still. The fifth moment, and the one closest to the event that would break the pattern permanently, happened the spring Eleanor turned 31. Her grandfather Raymond had been diagnosed with a slow-moving cardiac condition that his doctors monitored carefully. He was not in danger in the immediate term, but he was 81 years old, and Eleanor drove down to Fresno more often that year than she had in any previous year. One Sunday afternoon, Raymond asked her to sit with him in the workshop while he organized some papers. He had a small metal lockbox he kept on the shelf beside his levels and tools, and he spent a portion of that afternoon going through its contents with the methodical attention he applied to everything. He did not explain what he was doing in any direct way, but he handed her a business card, a lawyer in Fresno, a woman named Catherine Harlow, who specialized in estate planning, and he said, in his quiet voice that he had wanted her to have this for some time. She put it in her wallet. She did not ask him why. She did not press him for explanation. She had learned over 30 years that Raymond Voss said exactly what he meant to say and not one word more, and that what he said was worth keeping. If you have ever been in a room and felt that no one in it truly saw you and kept going anyway, leave a word in the comments. Just one word, whatever comes to mind. Eleanor would like to know she is not alone in this. Part 4, Inciting Incident, Sunday, March 14th. The temperature in Sacramento had been cold for the week, but that afternoon carried the particular quality of early spring light, thin and pale, arriving at an angle that made everything look like the day before something. Eleanor's parents were hosting a family dinner. Marcus was there with his wife, Deborah. 2 of Gerald's colleagues had been invited along with their spouses. Patricia had set the table with the matching china and had placed a floral arrangement in the center that Eleanor recognized as having come from a florist, not the garden. Eleanor arrived on time, as she always did. She wore a dark blue dress and her hair was put up. She brought a bottle of wine she had chosen with care. Partway through the meal, while the table was still in that warm middle territory between the main course and dessert, one of Gerald's colleagues, a man named Harris, regional director of something that involved offices and quarterly targets, asked Eleanor about her work. He asked the way people ask when they are only looking for a polite place to set the question down. She answered him directly and without apology. She described her practice, her work with competitive athletes, the program she had been building for the past 2 years in collaboration with 2 area high schools. She was composed and specific. She had learned over many years to present herself with the precision her father valued. Gerald set down his fork. He looked at Eleanor across the table with an expression she recognized, measured, corrective, already arriving at its conclusion. He said, with the even tone he used for matters of business, that Eleanor's practice had been a fine experiment, but that it was time to consider whether it was scalable. He used the word experiment. He said it only once, but it filled the room. Harris nodded in the way that colleagues nod when they defer to the senior person at the table. Marcus said nothing. His eyes moved to his plate. Deborah, who had known Eleanor for 4 years and who had witnessed similar moments without comment, set her napkin carefully on her lap. Patricia rose to begin clearing the salad plates. Eleanor looked at her father. She looked at him for the full length of a breath, and then she said quietly and without any disturbance in her voice that she understood. She asked to be excused for a moment. She walked down the hall to the bathroom and ran cold water over her wrists at the sink, something Desmond had taught her years ago as a way to return to the body when the mind got loud. She dried her hands. She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror for 5 seconds. Then she walked back to the table and finished her dinner. She helped clear the dishes. She thanked her parents for the meal. She drove home. That night, she found the business card Raymond had given her and placed it on her desk. In the morning, she called Catherine Harlow's office. Part 5, Strategic Preparation. The first meeting with Catherine Harlow took place on a Tuesday morning in late March. Catherine's office was in a low brick building near the Fresno courthouse, and the waiting room had the particular quiet of a place where serious work was done without ceremony. Catherine herself was 60, compact, silver-haired, with the unhurried precision of someone who had spent decades reading documents that other people had signed too quickly. Eleanor sat across the desk and explained the situation as plainly as she could. She had received a business card from her grandfather some years prior. She was calling because she wanted to understand what, if anything, it meant. Catherine set her pen down and looked at Eleanor for a moment. Then she said that Raymond had updated his estate plan 18 months ago, that the plan included provisions Catherine was not at liberty to discuss in their initial meeting, but that she was able to confirm Eleanor had been designated as the sole beneficiary of a trust Raymond had established in 1989, the year Eleanor was born, and had been quietly contributing to throughout her life. She said the trust was now valued at just over $1 million. She said Raymond had added a codicil the previous year that included a sealed letter to be delivered to Eleanor at the appropriate time. Eleanor sat with this for a moment. Outside the window, a truck moved slowly down the street. She asked Catherine if there was anything she needed to do. Catherine said there was nothing she needed to do immediately, but that she should understand the nature of the trust, its structure, its protections, and the conditions under which it would be administered. They spent the next hour and a half going through documents that Eleanor read carefully, the way she had been taught to read everything, from the beginning, without skipping, trusting what the instruments told her. She drove home with a folder of papers on the seat beside her and a very quiet feeling she could not yet name. In the months that followed, Eleanor continued to build. She had understood long before the dinner table on March 14th that her position in the world depended on what she had constructed with her own hands. But the conversation with Catherine had shifted something. It was not the money, though the money was real and significant. It was the knowledge that Raymond had seen her clearly enough, from the time she was born, to plan around who she was rather than who the family had decided she would be. She called him that spring and told him she had met with Catherine. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good. I thought it was time." She asked him why he had waited. He said he had wanted her to be ready. He said there was a difference between handing someone a tool and watching them reach for it themselves. She did not tell anyone else, not Marcus, not her parents. She had learned from 8 years of competitive training that preparation conducted in silence is preparation that cannot be interrupted. She devoted the following 8 months to 3 parallel tracks. The first was her practice. She expanded it, deliberately added 2 staff members, formalized her partnership with the high schools, accepted an invitation to speak at a regional sports medicine conference in the fall. She had, by the end of that year, a practice that could not reasonably be called an experiment by any standard Gerald would recognize. The second track was her training. She had agreed, through a series of quiet negotiations that had begun when she was 32 and concluded when she was 38, to participate in an exhibition event at the Meridian Athletic Club, a prestigious invitation-only gathering of regional martial arts figures, held annually under the club's banners in their grand hall. The event was not a competition. Technically, it was a showcase. But the showcase carried the weight of reputation, and Eleanor understood exactly what was at stake in it. The third track was the most significant one, and the one she had never spoken of to anyone in her family. His name was Derek Calloway. He was 48 years old, the owner of Calloway Combat Sports, the largest privately held martial arts organization in the Northern California region. He had built his reputation over 20 years on a series of high-profile exhibitions and training partnerships, and he had maintained that reputation partly by positioning himself as the definitive authority on who did and did not belong in the regional martial arts world. He had, on 3 documented occasions over the preceding decade, publicly dismissed Eleanor's practice, her methodology, and her standing. He had done this at the Meridian Athletic Club's annual gathering, where he was a founding sponsor, in front of audiences who included many of the people whose professional respect Eleanor had spent years earning. The most recent dismissal had come 18 months prior. He had given a speech about standards in the industry that included, without naming her directly, a characterization of what he called boutique practitioners with no serious competitive record. The people in the room had understood the reference. Eleanor had been in that room. She had noted the faces that turned toward her when he spoke. She had kept her own expression steady and her glass level and her shoulders precisely where they were. She had taken notes. There was one evening in January of the year the exhibition was scheduled, when she came home from a particularly difficult session at the practice, to find 3 voicemails from her father, all 3 about Marcus's latest professional achievement. All 3 leaving some implicit comparison behind them like a shadow in a hall. She sat in the kitchen for a long time. The lights outside were orange in the dark. A cup of tea went cold on the table in front of her. She called her closest friend, a woman named Audrey, who had known Eleanor since their first year of university and who had, over 20 years, become the kind of person who could sit in silence on the phone and make it feel like company. Eleanor told her everything: the trust, the exhibition, the years of accumulated patience. Audrey listened until Eleanor was finished, and then she said, with the directness that was the reason Eleanor had kept her close, "You have already won this. You are just waiting for the place to put it down." Eleanor dried her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. She said she knew that. She said she was just very tired. Audrey said that was allowed. She stayed on the phone for another hour, talking about nothing in particular, while the kitchen went quieter around Eleanor and the teacup sat cold and small on the table. In February, Catherine Harlow called to inform Eleanor that Raymond's condition had shifted. He was comfortable and being well cared for. He had asked Catherine to forward the sealed letter to Eleanor. Eleanor read it alone at the desk in her office on a Wednesday afternoon when the practice was quiet. It took her 12 minutes to read all 4 handwritten pages. The letter contained, among other things, a detailed and specific account of a financial transaction that had occurred 14 years prior, a transaction involving Gerald Voss, Marcus Voss, and a property that had been in the Voss family for 30 years, a decision made without Raymond's meaningful consent during a period when his health had made complex conversations difficult. The transaction had reduced the estate by an amount that should have been divided among multiple heirs, and had instead been absorbed quietly into a single account. Raymond had documented everything. He had kept the bank statements, the correspondence, and the signatures. He had consulted a separate attorney, not Catherine, to understand what the documentation meant. He had concluded and written this in his letter with the steady hand of a man who was telling the truth without decoration, that he did not wish to litigate or to expose. He wished for Eleanor to know. He wished for Eleanor to have the full picture. He believed that understanding was more durable than action and that Eleanor would know what to do with the truth when the time came. She sat at her desk for a long time after she finished reading. The afternoon light had moved across the floor while she read, and it was lower now, touching the edge of the bookshelf. She folded the letter carefully. She placed it in the fireproof case she kept in the locked lower drawer of her desk, the one modeled, she recognized without humor, on the cabinets her father kept in his home office. She took 2 slow breaths. Then she called Catherine Harlow and asked her what the correct next step was. If you believe that preparation is its own form of dignity, that building carefully and quietly is an act of self-respect, press pause for a moment and let Eleanor know in the comments. What do you think she did next? Part 6 Public Reckoning, the Meridian Athletic Club's annual exhibition, was held on a Friday evening in April. The Grand Hall could accommodate 530 seated guests, and this year it was at capacity. The event drew regional sponsors, coaches, athletes, journalists from 2 fitness publications, 3 city council members who were patrons of the club, and a significant portion of the regional martial arts community whose careers in one way or another touched the events that took place on its floor. Eleanor arrived early, as she always did. She wore a slate gray suit. Her hair was down. She carried a leather portfolio and a small garment bag containing her training clothes, because she was scheduled as the event program noted to participate in a demonstration segment in the second half of the evening. What the event program did not note was what she had arranged with the club's director of programming 6 weeks prior. Derek Calloway was there from the beginning, as he always was. He was one of the founding sponsors of the event and conducted himself accordingly, moving through the pre-event reception with the practiced ease of a man who had not seriously considered the possibility that an evening might not go in his favor for a very long time. He greeted people by name. He accepted congratulations about his newest training facility, which had opened that March in Elk Grove. He stood near the bar during the reception portion of the evening and held court with the comfortable assurance of a man on his own stage. He greeted Eleanor when she arrived. He was cordial. He had always been cordial to her face. It was one of the things she had noted over the years, the particular quality of a man whose contempt for you required an audience to become visible. The evening moved through its first half in the way of events like this: remarks from the club's president, recognition of long-standing members, a short film about the club's history. Dinner was served. Wine was poured. The room settled into the comfortable noise of 500 people engaged in conversations they had been planning since the invitations arrived. At 8:15, the program moved into its demonstration segment. 3 demonstration pairs had been scheduled. The first 2 proceeded without incident, technical exhibitions of Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu respectively, well received by the crowd, generous applause. The third demonstration was Eleanor and Derek Calloway. It had been announced in the program as an exhibition of advanced Muay Thai technique. It had been framed, at Calloway's own suggestion, a suggestion Eleanor had anticipated, and allowed as a technical showcase between a senior practitioner and an emerging regional voice. He had framed it this way in a brief note to the club's director. The framing had suited him because it positioned him as a senior figure. Eleanor had read the note when the director shared it with her, and she had said that the framing sounded fine. They took the floor together. The room was attentive in the way rooms become attentive when 2 people stand in a cleared space and face each other, that particular quality of held breath that arrives before something is decided. What happened in the following 12 minutes was a technical demonstration that the 214 people who later described it to others would use the same word for: clean. Eleanor moved the way she had been moving since she was 12 years old in a community center gymnasium in Sacramento, patient, unhurried, with the composure of someone who had been preparing for this particular surface for years. She was not performing. She was simply doing what she did, and doing it in front of people who had previously been told, by a man with a microphone and a sponsorship placard, that she did not do it well enough to merit their serious attention. Calloway was a skilled practitioner. He was not unskilled, but he had not trained at this level in years, and the ring, even an exhibition ring, does not accommodate the distance between what a man believes about himself and what he is actually prepared to do. She did not embarrass him. She had not planned to embarrass him. She moved through the demonstration with precision and care and complete technical honesty, and the room did the rest. When they stepped back and separated at the end of the 12 minutes, the applause began in the middle of the room and spread. Several people stood, including, Eleanor noticed, one of the city council members and the editor of one of the 2 fitness publications in attendance. The club's president, a woman named Sandra Holt, who had known Eleanor for 6 years, returned to the podium with the particular expression of someone who had just been given an occasion they had been waiting for. Sandra invited Eleanor to the microphone. Eleanor walked to it. The room settled. She thanked Sandra. She thanked the club. She spoke for exactly 4 minutes, and she did not raise her voice once. She thanked Desmond Clark, who was seated in the 3rd row, for 30 years of teaching her that composure was a form of power. She thanked Raymond Voss, her grandfather, for teaching her to measure twice and trust what the instruments told her. She announced with the same even delivery she used for everything that her practice, effective the following month, would be expanding to a 2nd location and would be formalizing a scholarship program for young athletes from under-resourced schools, funded in part by the Raymond Voss Family Foundation, which she had established in January. She then turned and looked at Derek Calloway, who was standing to one side of the floor, and she said his name. Her voice did not change in quality or temperature. She said that he had called her practice a boutique operation with no serious competitive record, and she said this in front of everyone who had heard him say it, and she said it without accusation or heat. She placed the leather portfolio she had been carrying on the edge of the demonstration platform. Inside it were the 3 documented instances of his public dismissal, assembled with dates and venues and the names of witnesses. She said that she had not brought the portfolio to argue with him. She had brought it because she believed that facts, presented clearly, required no argument. She said very quietly that she had also brought it because a man who held himself out as the regional authority on standards in this industry should be aware that the people whose professional opinions he most valued were standing in this room watching this moment and now knew what she knew. The room was completely still. Calloway's face had shifted. The particular quality of certainty that had characterized it all evening had left it, and what remained was something smaller and less practiced. He was holding his glass. His knuckles were visible. Sandra Holt at the podium asked whether there was anything Mr. Calloway would like to add. He said no. One of his 2 business partners seated at a table near the back, who had come tonight as supporters exchanged a look with the other that was visible from 12 feet away. The woman next to Eleanor at the demonstration platform reached over and touched Eleanor's arm briefly. It was Audrey, who had driven 3 hours to be in the room, who had arranged with Sandra to be seated in the front section, and who had been in the 4th row 30 years ago when Raymond Voss applauded with his whole hands. Eleanor returned to her seat. The evening continued. By the time dessert was served, 3 separate conversations had begun at 3 separate tables, and their subject was not the dessert. Part 7 consequence cascade in the 6 weeks that followed. The consequences arrived not in a single wave, but in a sequence, the way dominoes fall, each one inevitable once the previous had moved. The fitness publication whose editor had stood during the applause ran a feature on Eleanor's expanding practice in their May issue. The piece was 2,000 words and included a photograph taken outside the new Sacramento location. The piece was picked up and referenced by 2 regional business journals. By the end of May, Eleanor had received 17 new client inquiries from the Meridian Club event alone. Derek Calloway's newest facility in Elk Grove lost its naming sponsor 6 days after the exhibition. The sponsor, a regional athletic equipment distributor whose owner had been in the room at Meridian, cited a schedule conflict in his letter of withdrawal. The letter was brief and used language that was careful and final. The Meridian Athletic Club's board voted in June to restructure its founding sponsorship category. The restructuring was described in their internal communications as a routine administrative matter. Calloway's name was not on the revised sponsorship list. The club's director of programming, who had worked with Eleanor for 6 weeks to arrange the evening, sent her a brief note acknowledging the restructuring. It contained no editorial commentary. It did not need to. One of Calloway's 2 business partners, the one whose look across the table Eleanor had observed, separated from the partnership in late May. The separation was acknowledged in a brief trade publication notice. The remaining partner was quoted as saying they were excited about the future direction of the organization. No further detail was given. Eleanor read each of these developments as they occurred, and she set each one aside with the same methodical attention she brought to the documents in her lockbox. She did not call anyone to discuss them. She did not post about them. She went to her practice each morning and did the work that was there to be done. Her parents heard about the Meridian evening through someone who had been there, a couple from their church congregation who were patrons of the club. Gerald called on a Sunday. The call was shorter than his usual calls. He said he had heard the evening had been significant. He did not use the word significant as his father might have as a plain, earnest word. He used it carefully, the way he used all words, feeling for the edges of it. He said he was glad it had gone well for her. She said, "Thank you, Dad." There was a pause on the line. Then he said, in a different register than she had heard from him before, quieter, with something deliberate about it, that he thought she had done good work. She said nothing for a moment. She said she appreciated that. Marcus sent a text message the following Tuesday. It contained one sentence. It said, "I didn't know about the trust." Eleanor read it twice. She believed him. She typed back that she knew. She did not add anything else. Raymond was informed, through Catherine, that the foundation bearing his name had been established and publicly announced. Catherine relayed that he had nodded and said, quietly, that he had thought she would know what to do with it. He died in October in his small house near Fresno, with his children and grandchildren present. He died by all accounts as he had lived without fuss, with his affairs in order, and with the look of a man who had said what he meant to say. Part 8 resolution scene the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Eleanor's kitchen table seated 8. There was Audrey, who had brought a salted caramel pie from a bakery in Davis because she knew it was Eleanor's favorite and had called ahead to make sure they had made extras. There was Desmond Clark, who was 71 now and who still moved with the unhurried certainty that Eleanor had first observed when she was 12, and who had accepted the invitation by saying only that he would bring bread, and who had brought 2 loaves of sourdough still warm from his own oven. There was Catherine Harlow, who had driven down from Fresno and who sat at the end of the table with a cup of tea and the comfortable manner of someone who had spent years watching things resolve exactly as they should. There was Audrey's husband Thomas, who carved the turkey with the careful attention of a man doing something he takes seriously. There was a young woman named Sasha, one of the first scholarship athletes from Eleanor's new program, who was 19 and studying sports rehabilitation at the same university Eleanor had attended, and who had sent Eleanor an email in September that Eleanor had printed and kept in her desk. The email said in its final paragraph that she had never been in a room with an adult who made her feel as though what she was building actually mattered until she walked into Eleanor's practice for the first time. Eleanor had read that paragraph 4 times when it arrived. The table was mismatched 3 Windsor chairs, 2 padded ones from the dining set Eleanor had bought at an estate sale, a wooden stool from the workshop corner, and 2 folding chairs with cushions she had found in the closet. The tablecloth was off white linen with a small coffee stain near the left corner that she had decided, after 3 attempts to remove it, to leave alone. A candle burned in a glass holder in the center. The afternoon light came through the kitchen window at the low November angle and landed on the sourdough bread in the bread basket, and on the salted caramel pie on the counter, and on the faces of the people around her table. Eleanor poured wine and stood for a moment before sitting down. She did not make a speech. She was not a person given to speeches at her own table. She said, in the quiet voice she used for things that mattered, that she was glad they were all here. Desmond picked up his glass and said that she had earned it. Audrey, without ceremony, began passing the potatoes. Somewhere across town, in a house with matching china and a hallway lined with framed newspaper clippings, a phone sat unanswered on a kitchen counter. Eleanor did not know what was being said in that house, and she found, when she considered it briefly, that it was not a question she needed answered. Some doors, when they closed correctly. She sat down. The candle burned. The bread was warm. Sasha was telling Desmond about the biomechanics paper she was working on, and Desmond was asking her questions in the careful, specific way of a teacher who was interested in the answers. Eleanor set her hands flat on the table for a moment and felt the solidity of it. Then she reached for the bread. Part 9 closing sermon. If you are watching this and something in Eleanor's story felt familiar, not the circumstances perhaps, but the quality of it. The texture of carrying something heavy, and carrying it quietly, and carrying it for a very long time, then this last part is for you. There is a version of this story that insists the ending is about the reckoning, about the hall and the 500 witnesses and the leather portfolio and the face of the man who had not prepared. And the reckoning is real. The reckoning matters. But Eleanor has come to understand that the reckoning was not in fact where the story ended. It was simply the place where the weight could finally be set down. The work of Eleanor's life was not the 12 minutes on the demonstration floor. It was the years of going back, of returning to the ring when the ring was empty, when there was no audience, when the only witness to her discipline was the quality of the discipline itself. That is the part that the audience does not see, and the part that makes everything else possible. So here is what she would like you to know. You are allowed to build in silence. The preparation that no one observes is not wasted. It is the most important preparation there is. The things you build when no one is watching are the things that hold. You are allowed to keep the business card. Whatever the equivalent of Raymond's business card is in your own life, the small specific gesture from someone who saw you clearly, keep it. Put it somewhere you will not lose it. Do not dismiss it because it arrived quietly. The things that arrive quietly are often the things that last. You are allowed to measure twice. Gerald Voss believed precision was love and got the application wrong, but the principle was not entirely without value. Taking the time to understand what you are working with, really understand it, without rushing is not hesitation. It is the practice of someone who respects the work. You are allowed to wait for the right table. Not every room deserves your full presence. Eleanor spent years trying to be fully present in rooms that were not built for her. The table that needed her was smaller and warmer and had a coffee stain on the linen and was set with mismatched chairs and warm bread and the people who had shown up when it cost something to show up. And finally, you are allowed to let the last scene belong to your chosen people, not to the ones who left, not to the ones who dismissed you or measured you or looked at your second place ribbon and turned back to the stove. The final frame belongs to the table where the candle is burning and the bread is warm, and someone who matters to you is asking a real question and listening to the real answer. The antagonist may be referenced in passing a deleted voicemail, an unanswered phone, but they do not sit at this table. Their absence is not a wound. It is the correct conclusion of choices they made long before you made yours. If Eleanor's story meant something to you, please subscribe. Share it with someone who is in a season of quiet building and may need to hear it. And leave a word in the comments, just one word for the version of yourself that has been carrying something heavy and carrying it with dignity. Eleanor is listening.